Here we go. Futures odds at FanDuel for the Canadian teams of the Western Conference. The Oilers, the favorites to win the Stanley Cup. The Canucks and Jets Stanley Cup odds both hovering around 25-1. The Flames plus 280 to make the playoffs. As we welcome Mike Johnson and Craig Button back to chat with us. We're going to start with the Edmonton Oilers. They make it to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final last year, so we assume it's cup or bust once again for this Oilers team. Interesting offseason. It starts so brilliantly under Jeff Jackson on trade deadline, there on free agent frenzy day. Then they lose the two young players in the offer sheet. Where do you see this team right now, Mike? In terms of defense, I feel like that's the area people are questioning.
They're the Cup favorite for a reason. They're obviously one of the best teams in the league. And they made it to the final last year with a team that was flawed as well. It wasn't a perfect team. And yes, it's changed a little bit. Yes, they need one more defenseman. But you mentioned the fact they didn't match the offer sheets. That was intentional. They wanted to leave cap space for the very defenseman that they know that they need.
Yeah.
And so they're not a finished product. But even as is, they're still one of the best teams in the league. And when you see what McDavid and Draisaitl can do, there's a lot of reason to think that they have a great chance to get back and maybe take it that one extra goal further than they did last year.
Last year, the season just started out as poorly as it possibly could have for a team that had high expectations. Chris Knobloch and Paul Coffey coming in really gave them a sense of stability, I thought, and we saw how much better they became. And certainly they made additions prior to the trade deadline, at the deadline. And keep in mind, Evander Kane was not healthy. He was playing through a lot of hurt. To me, he's a playoff player, and the opportunity...
And you're going to get him as a nice late free addition.
That's
healthy.
Right.
Yep.
And whatever additions they make on the blue line, you go back a couple of years ago when they added Matthias Ekholm. If that type of player, if they can get another player that can fit in, I don't have any reason to believe that they cannot win the Stanley Cup this coming season.
Let's talk about the Winnipeg Jets. 110-point season last season. They had a great season the regular season. They lose in the first round. Tough draw for them. And then they lose Monahan, Toffoli, and Brendan Dillon in free agency. You get Perfetti signed. Where are you seeing this team?
Your body language is oozing what we're all thinking.
I want to believe.
You want to say, look, they're great last year. They have, they had some changes. They're going to be great again. But I don't know if I feel certain that they will be as good again either. I think defensively they were so good last year, and Hellebuck was so incredible. And I expect him to be good once again. But it's hard to be the best team in the league because you're good at defense. Specifically, like you have to be able to score. And I just. Will they be able to score quite as much, Craig? When they get to the playoffs, which they probably will get to again, can they compete with the very best teams in the West? It still feels like they might be just still a good team, but not as good as the top 5 teams, top 4 teams in the West.
And isn't that the challenge for Winnipeg? It's who their competition is. I don't think any of us doubt that Winnipeg has a good team, and they've done really good work there. But you know what? As you get to the playoffs, being able to sustain that pace, that intensity, that competitive level, and not that they're not competitors, but it just seemed that last year, once Colorado got rolling, and keep in mind, during the regular season, Winnipeg owned Colorado.
Torched Colorado.
And then it got to the playoffs, and it was a 180-degree reversal. So for the Winnipeg Jets, they had Monahan, they had Toffoli, they had Brendan Dillon. Those 3 players, that trio of players, added real significant elements to that team that allowed them to be really successful down the stretch and give us hope come playoff time. That's where there's going to have to be some replication for Kevin Cheveldayoff.
The one thing they should be able to cling to is that we're pretty good, but we got a great goalie.
Yes.
And sometimes that's all you need.
Yep.
Except their great goalie hasn't been great in the playoffs. But if he plays as well as he does in the regular season, then, they can advance in the playoffs, even maybe with some of their shortcomings.
And they have the Ehlers thing kind of hanging over them this year, right? If he plays really well, you might want to hold on to him for a playoff run, and then maybe you lose him in free agency, or maybe you're in a position where you trade him.
For the Winnipeg Jets, Nikolai Ehlers, whoever, you know what? Go and play.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything hanging over the Winnipeg Jets. You know what's hanging over the Winnipeg Jets? The fact that they haven't had success come playoff time.
That's fair. Let's get to the Vancouver Canucks. What a season last year. So fun. And then you get the Thatcher Demko injury situation. That's kind of hanging over them a little bit this year. Do you think they could replicate what they did last year, Mike? You bring in Jake DeBrusk.
Right. So, again, good team, but so much went right last year.
Yeah.
So many guys had career years. They're called career years because they don't happen every year, right? Like, it happened once in your career. So it's Quinn Hughes, JT Miller, Brock Besser. They all going to do that again? Probably not. They all probably take a slight step back. Still very good, but not quite as. Maybe Pettersson takes a step forward because he was down. So I don't think it goes quite as perfectly well. But that doesn't mean they won't make the playoffs and make noise once they're there. if their goalie gets healthy. Demko when healthy, incredible.
Yeah.
But this has been sort of lingering a long, long time. And even when he gets back in the lineup, how confident can you be that he won't hurt himself again? Because that, unfortunately, has been sort of the story of his time in Vancouver.
Knees and hips for goaltenders, when you start to run into those issues, groins, they don't only become lingering, they become chronic.
Right.
And so Thatcher Demko is an elite goaltender when he's on. There's no question about it. And so for the Vancouver Canucks, the early part of the year, seeing where Demko's at, trying to get him as healthy as possible is obviously important for them. But also, I think having Seeloff's in there, he had to come in there. Maybe the expectations will be a little bit different for Artur Seeloff's coming in there on a team that has high expectations.
And he wants to be a #1 goaltender. Seeloff's does, right? So if anything, it's great for him, right? Because it's like, all right, here's your chance. Show us what you can do, and then maybe that's an asset you can move somewhere else.
And one of the things, they have lots of length and size on the blue line. And that helps protect, your goaltender at times. And it's also, we've seen that's a recipe for success. The ingredients come playoff time.
It might be one of those things like maybe in the regular season not quite as good. But in the postseason with a healthy Demko, they might be better positioned to go deeper.
Now, let's talk about the Calgary Flames. I'm going to try to make my body language as positive as possible here, but Craig Conroy shipped out Jake Markstrom, shipped out the bread man to the Washington Capitals, the bread boy, rather. And so you lose Mangiapane, you lose Jake Markstrom. They're finally saying rebuild, which I actually think is a positive thing in Calgary. They're not just saying like it's a retool. It's a full-on rebuild, and that fan base understands that, right? Don't insult the fan base. They know what's going on, right?
They're smart. They understand what's up. They understand a building's coming, Craig, right?
They do. Well, they traded Tyler Toffoli last summer. And then it started off. 9 players that were on the roster at the end of the 22-23 season are gone. So anything other than rebuild is not the right word. And 27-28 is where they're focused in. And they still have some really good players and attractive players, Mike, which I think will be really in. If I'm teams that want to bolster my lineup, I'm phoning Craig Conroy every single day, maybe not every day, on Rasmus Anderson, on Nazem Kadri, and Blake Coleman. They all have good contracts. They're all been proven good players.
I might step on Mackenzie Weegar too.
You're right. Weegar too. I'm for, and then Craig's going to have a decision to make. What kind of return can he get? Because you could see even more. Because I think everything is set up for 27-28, and they've been very open about it.
Yeah, they had a really good team, a really good run. They took their shots. They didn't work out in the playoffs the way they wanted to. Their window closed. You move on, and you move on from the players you have to. It's not easy. But I think you're right. The fans there are very smart. They understand what's going on, and they're willing to accept, with proper communication, where they're headed, which is, they're going to get a little bit lower in the standings, then they're going to start trying to build their way back up.
And first trade Craig makes is Yegor Sharangovich. He gets a guy that's going to be a cornerstone of this team. They've signed him long term. Pretty nice job on that first trade. So it builds a little confidence with the fan base, right? Okay, he knows what he's doing here.
Well, I think that you're trying not only to build up your own confidence, you're trying to build up and get the belief from the fan base, ownership too. And I think Craig really did a nice job. There was times, and we all heard reports that, this player would only go there, this player would only go there. And Craig says, I'm making the trades, not anybody else. And I think he really showed his chops during the regular season last year by saying, everybody said Noah Hannifin's going to Tampa Bay. Craig Conroy said, no, you're not. You're going where I'm going to get a return that I'm happy with. So I think that Craig really built up a lot of his own confidence and belief in himself, but also got the belief from outside as well and what he can do.
We're going to take one more break, and when these guys come back, we're going to get their Stanley Cup predictions. Stay tuned!